the Hanging On Podcast. And your hosts, Nagme, Melody, and Anna.
Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Hanging On Podcast. We're so thankful to have Dr. Jennifer back with us. She has been a personal coach to me, helping me through a lot of health issues and guiding me through some of the autoimmune and other things I've been dealing with. But today, and on our previous episode, we talked about all of that and connection of stress to inflammation, all of that. But today we want to talk about something especially me and Anna are going through. Melody is a little bit younger, so she's not there yet. But I believe I am going through perimenopause, and I know you are going through menopause. And so, Dr. Jennifer, our question is, what's the difference between menopause and perimenopause?
Hello. So, good question. So first of all, perimenopause is basically the leading into menopause. So menopause is a whole transition that we go through, and typically we talk about three phases. We talk about perimenopause, and then menopause, and postmenopause. Perimenopause is when your hormones start to shift and adjust. Basically, you're starting to head towards menopause. And so what you start seeing is that typically you start seeing progesterone start to decline and estrogen gets very erratic. And because of the erratic nature of that, that's what typically influences like a lot of the symptoms that women start having. And then menopause, the technical definition of menopause is when you haven't had a menstrual cycle for 1 full year. So even if you go 11 months and then you have it, then you start the whole clock over again. But I always say you don't get your menopause crown until you've gone a full year. And then postmenopause is the phase after menopause.
I have a follow-up question on that.
Yes.
This is near and dear to my heart, the menopause. I you know how like in the Bible they have to go unclean, the leopards? I feel like I have to go, I'm sorry, I'm in menopause. I'm sorry, I'm in menopause.
Right?
I don't know what personality I'm going to bring to you today.
Yeah.
I may sweat uncontrollably.
Yeah.
But so like I had a partial hysterectomy in my 30s, so I still have my ovaries but on my uterus. So how would someone be able to tell they're in menopause or premenopause if they don't have the period as a sign? Is there any way to tell?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I have that challenge. I have patients that have that very same challenge. And what I'll recommend is they get ovulation test strips. So they're literally like, you can get like a box of, I think like 40 or 50 of them for like $10. You can order them off of Amazon. And they're basically test strips that women will use a lot of times when they're trying to get pregnant. And so you urinate on the test strips and then it will show you when you're ovulating. So that's one that's kind of like a very affordable kind of method that women can do very easily.
Yeah. I was just going with the method of I was always known for being very even-toned.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Well,
and always loving my husband.
Not anymore.
And I'm like, why
you love him still deep down inside.
I do. I love him deeply. But I'm like, why is it? He hasn't changed for 30 years. He's been doing this. Why is this bothering me now?
So what age does perimenopause and menopause usually start? And what are some of the symptoms like that, maybe someone can say, oh, I might be like, they still have their period like me, but you're kind of sensing, I feel it coming on. I'm like approaching 50. So what would you say is the typical age? And yeah.
So for the majority of women, it's usually going to be, around their 40s that they're going to be starting to shift into perimenopause. It can start, however, it can start like as early as the 30s, studies have shown. And we're seeing that more and more nowadays. And I believe that's just because of the like toxins in our environment and stresses, and that has undoubtedly affected our hormones and our hormone cycle. Now, part two of that question you asked, like, how do you know? How can you tell? Because it really is different for every woman. There are a lot of things that like a lot of women will typically complain about, but it is an individual experience as well. I actually, one of the things that I have on my website is that like and this is the typical scenario that I hear is like, I can't think, I have no energy, I can't lose weight, I have no libido, and I feel like my body doesn't belong to me anymore. And if that kind of in a nutshell, I feel like that's the experience that like most women that come to see me, that this is what they're complaining about. So if you feel that way and you're in that age group, you know, it is a good indicator that your body may be starting to shift.
Yeah. And also as Anna was kind of talking about, a lot of your emotions. Like I have a teenage daughter in the house, and I just realized the two hormones together is not a good combination right now.
Yeah. Well, the hormones, when your hormones start to shift, it affects your neurotransmitters. And so that's why, like you expressed, Anna, you start to feel like, you know, you feel like your mood's dysregulated. And so there is a very real, like, physiological reason for that that's happening in your body. And then typically in perimenopause, what we're seeing is progesterone starts to decline. Like that's one of the first hormones that starts to decline. And when progesterone levels start to decline, anxiety is one of the most common symptoms. Yeah, and anxiety and sleep dysregulation. I would say that those are two of the earliest kind of signs that women will start to experience.
Are there remedies that women can easily access for something like the mood swings and the anxiety that would help them cope day to day, maybe the sleep as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, there's, you know, as a functional medicine physician in particular, like there is always a strong emphasis on diet and lifestyle. And I would say that is key. One of the conversations that I have with women that I'm working with is that I try to really say that the things that we got away with in our 20s, you know, we're not going to really be able to get away with anymore. And this is not the phase in your life to try and like neglect your self-care. So really, I would say cornerstone is making sure you take care of your diet, you take care of stress, and you take care of sleep. Like those are the three most important things to lean into. And beyond that, there are like natural supports that you can use, like, you know, a good multi-mineral is going to be important because that helps support the adrenals that have a lot to do with our stress. There are, you know, products that you can use, like evening primrose oil is something that a lot of women benefit from during perimenopause and menopause. And then there are herbs like ashwagandha or maca. What I would say, though, is it's important to, rather than like using an approach throwing darts and hoping it sticks, like try to work with somebody that you trust that can kind of help guide you and see what your specific needs are. And then I didn't even mention, you know, the use of bioidenticals, which is something that I do in my practice. So, you know, if you are seeing that there's evidence of the declining progesterone, like some progesterone in the evening can work wonders for a lot of women.
That is really good. And I love what you say, what used to work for you, you know, tends not to work later. I used to have this thing called a metabolism. And It has since left the building. I have put up missing posters, but I've yet to get any phone calls of where it's run off to.
It's so unfair. I always say it. Nobody ever told us we were going to have to go through puberty twice. And this is like puberty on steroids, right?
It really is. I know when I'm in front of the Lord, like I'll be over my bitterness of having to go through menopause. But here in my fleshly self, I want to ask God, like, labor wasn't enough, monthly periods wasn't enough. You wanted us to go through this like grand finale. I feel like at a fireworks show, it's like the grand finale. Those were just little thing, little boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get ready for the grand finale of womanhood. It's going to be a party. Will you have anyone attending your party by the time you're done? Probably not. Only if they have Jesus deep down in their hearts will they love you through it. But is there any specific diet-wise that you recommend? Like, some people say low carb, some people, all the different diets. Do you have any dietary recommendations?
So first and foremost, always my most solid basic recommendation is to try not to make diet too complicated. And sometimes we do get into like, should I do low carb? Should I do, like a Whole30? And there are a lot of different like diets out there. But the easiest thing to do, I'm telling you, like if you're just getting started and you don't know where to start, is to start with just eating a clean, whole foods based diet and aim to have your plates balanced. And what I mean by a balanced plate is half of your plate should be non-starchy veggies, and then the other quarter of your plate, a healthy protein, and then the other quarter of your plate, a complex carbohydrate. And then also having a healthy fat in there. And if you start there, if you start just by eating like less foods out of boxes, not getting into too many extra added sugars, trying not to eat a lot of takeout, eating most of your food, home cooked and whole foods, that the way that God has made our food to be, it is the best thing to lean into. So just try to get back to basics. That is the most solid place to start. And I find that if people try not to make it more complicated than necessary, we may have individual needs that we lean into, like if you have food sensitivities or food intolerances, or if you're going to make like specific tweaks to your diet with looking at the macros, like how much protein, how much carbohydrates, how much fat you're getting. But if you're just getting started, I'm telling you, just start with eating a whole foods-based diet and eating balanced plates. That is a solid place to start.
And lots of water.
And lots of water, absolutely.
Lots of bathroom breaks.
You had told me on our personal, you've helped me a lot. It was like, you also said what to eat first and to like sit down and cook like veggies first, because that's going to help your digestion, and make sure you're not like, you're actually like focusing on the eating. Like some of the tips you've given has been pretty amazing.
Yeah. So for sugar regulation, there's a lot of kind of like sugar hacks that you can do. And one of them is the order in which you eat your food. And so eating veggies, protein, fats, and then saving your carbohydrates for last, that will help with sugar regulation. Supporting sugar regulation is going to be like metabolic health is everything. And so it is definitely a cornerstone of protecting our hormone health. And then you talked about the mindful eating. Hopefully we're not going all over the place for your listeners too much. But mindful eating that's probably one of the most common topics that I discuss with my patients, because, and Nagme, you know this, but one of the things that I do when I work with somebody is I go through like what an average 24-hour day looks like for you. And so we talk about all the things, we talk about how you're sleeping, what your stress levels are like, and like what your eating habits are like. And part of that eating habits discussion is not only what you eat, but it's how you eat. And so a lot of it, especially in the American culture, a lot of us are eating like on the go, like we're eating in the car on the way to work, or we're eating like standing up in the kitchen at the kitchen island while our kids are doing their homework, or you name it. But while we're eating, we're not actually paying attention to our food and slowing down. And so what happens then is that your nervous system is more heightened. It's more in what we call a sympathetic mode. And when you're in a sympathetic mode of your nervous system, your body will not prioritize digestion. So you really want to support being in a parasympathetic mode, which is called our rest and digest mode. So the way that we can do that is, one, just kind of take a break before we eat, take a few breaths, and actually slow down, pay attention to your food, and just practice what we call mindful eating, which is basically not eating while you're avoiding distracted eating. And just when you eat, just sit down. I always say the world will still spin if I take a break and I just sit down and eat my food. Like, God surely has this in his hands. And he, like, me stopping to eat is like, the world will be okay with that.
Yeah, that's really good, because I know for me, my whole life, I've been a grazer. Just snack throughout, don't eat big meals. Like me and my husband, we go out to dinner, we can share a meal, because I won't eat much of it, but I'll eat 30 minutes later. And my weight always would stay in check. And like you said, it what used to work doesn't work now. But those are some really good tips.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, Anna, because I feel like I hear that a lot. What women will say is, I used to do this before and it worked. So it worked great. And I was able to say, like, lose 5-10 pounds or whatever it may be. But those same strategies they try to do in their 40s or their 50s, and they feel stuck. They just feel like they can't get, their metabolism to work the way that it used to. So our just like life, our bodies are dynamic and our bodies are changing and our bodies shift. And so what we did, in our 20s or in our 30s may not necessarily work as we get older in our 40s and 50s.
Losing weight is one of the struggles.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this and changing things up. We've talked about walking after eating is like...
Yes, that's another great strategy.
It's another great strategy. So it's good to know the general, but it's really, like you said, it's good to have someone who walks it through with you, coaches you, and because each person is different. Some people, it depends. Different things work on different bodies, but there's different things you can do. So just being mindful that the old methods and metabolism is not in place, and so to do things differently and to be more active. And like, I've tried to do walks after I eat, and it's been doing wonders for me personally. One of the things we struggle as Christians is as Anna was talking about, this guilt of our emotion. Like for me, it's my teenage kids. With you, it's like, why do I get annoyed at my husband so much? And so like, what can we do? And it's like horrible, because I'm like, she has her hormones. I know it's my hormones that's getting annoyed. Like, it's both are not a good combination right now in our household. I know a lot of people, we've talked about divorce.
Yeah, we've talked about how it affects relationships. And it seems like at the 30-year mark, you'll see this divorce like trend.
Yeah, and you're like wondering, I wonder if the hormones had something to do with that.
Yeah, and so what do you do health wise, like just to rein in those emotions or be mindful of them, or kind of what are some things you can share with us? And also is spiritually, like,
yes,
you struggle because you're like, I just blew up at my kid, like that's not good, that's sin. And so like there's this, your emotions are out of whack, and how do you deal with it, in terms of like medically, or, how would you coach someone through that? But also spiritually, what would you say?
So I think first and foremost, even though I hope that, that joke I made, if the hormones were involved, that really was a joke. And I think that it's really important for us to be a good friend to ourselves.
Mm.
So, and that means offering ourselves grace. And I feel like, especially as women, sometimes we are much better at offering others grace than we are offering ourselves grace. So, one, to just acknowledge that your body is in a transition, and, every day it will probably not be perfect. And so make sure that you're a good friend to yourself. So that means, one, the way in which you're talking to yourself, and two, the way in which you're taking care of yourself. And again, it goes back to understanding that your body is likely going to need more support during this time, during this transition. So your schedule may look different than it looked before. And
Yeah.
so giving yourself permission to like so there's three key areas that I try to encourage my patients to carve out time for themselves. And these are just like natural rhythms in our day. One is a morning time, two is meal times, and then three is an evening time or a bedtime routine. And those, you don't have to do like some elaborate, like 2-hour, ritual or routine for each of those. Even if you just take like 10 to 15 minutes to have some type of a morning time during your meal times, like we said, to actually use that time to take a break and to take care of yourself, and then to have some type of a bedtime routine. Those are kind of like natural spaces in your day where you can prioritize your self-care. We tend to think of self-care as like going for a massage or like, getting a facial. And it's not to say that those things aren't like good things, but those aren't things that we're doing every day. And we do need to make sure that, because stress is going to come at us every day, we do need to make sure that we're carving out spaces in our day that can help us keep our stress in check. And as our hormones are when our hormones are transitioning in this perimenopause to menopause phase, and Melody, this is for you,
Yeah.
because, this is something that you will go through, that the more you can take care of that at the front end, the better off your body is going to be. So getting these healthy habits like in front of you is going to help you as you go through the transition.
That was actually going to be a question I was going to raise just now, is how we can prepare ourselves to enter this phase, because I've not experienced any perimenopause symptoms yet. I do want to provide my body with what it needs in advance. It sounds like stress management is a great way of coping for
Yes.
women of all age. And then just being mindful about our diets and our water intake, the nutrition nourishment we're giving our bodies. But is there anything we could prepare ourselves, like hormonally, or maybe there's a technique you offer women at my age to prepare their mindset and their bodies for these changes outside of just the self-care you talked about?
Yeah, there's this is a dietary strategy, which is called seed cycling, and it's where you eat different types of seeds in different phases in your cycle. So and then that's something that can be helpful for support. Like, it's just a natural support that you can use using food that will help your cycle. And again, it's, I hate to say the same things over and over again, but it really is about, prioritizing your diet, prioritizing sleep, and prioritizing stress reduction. Like, those are going to be your three main pillars. And then, of course, there are like natural vitamins and supplements that you can take too. So big ones for that I would recommend is like a good B complex, a good like multi-mineral complex, Vitamin C is actually really good for protecting the adrenals and progesterone. Maca is an herb that can be really helpful for both adrenal stress and energy. And then this would fall under a multimineral, but magnesium is one that I recommend commonly. But, I think the big thing is to understand that there isn't like a magic wand out there, and
Yeah.
that all of these things like support each other. And also just remember that you don't have to be perfect. Like you don't have to have the
Yeah.
perfect program dialed in. It's not about eating perfect all the time. It's not about like doing everything perfect all the time. Just aim for like 80% of the time. Give yourself grace. Understand that sometimes you're going to mess up. And so rather than like throwing in the towel when you do, you just kind of get back on the horse again.
Love
But
that.
our body does really have a way of like, you give it a little bit of attention and nourishment, and it really like God really has designed our bodies in a way to heal. And so when we do give it that attention and nourishment, I mean, I'm telling you, you'll be surprised at how much your body will grab onto that, and how much you can get it to change.
That's really good. And I like how you said basically, don't let perfection be the enemy of good.
Yes.
And so I was curious. So like my mom had breast cancer at age 30. And so I remember menopause, it did not go well for her. And she was never able to take hormones, because they says,
Yes.
that there's, I guess, now correct me. I'm going off, hearsay. Because
Yes.
that's what you base all your information on. No, but
What does the internet say?
if the internet says it, it must be true.
Yes,
That's science. No. So anyways, she could never take hormones because we were always told it causes breast cancer.
Yes.
So what is your take on that?
Oh boy, this is a big subject. So, there was a study that was done. It's called the Women's Health Initiative study, and that study was done a long time ago. And the reason why they did the study was to try and understand, as we had a generation coming to age, and how that was going to impact Medicare in particularly. And so they wanted to do this study to show that if women used HRT, that could actually help with healthcare measures overall, and potentially decrease, the taxing on the healthcare system, i.e. Medicare. So they did this study, and the results of the study were coming out, and part of what they initially came out is that they were seeing this tie between the use of HRT and estrogen-related cancers, namely breast cancer. And there was also some links with cardiovascular disease. So there was a huge scare when this happened, and you had patients scared, doctors scared, doctors were scared of lawsuits and blah, blah, blah. So this information got out, and then it kind of just put this black cloud over HRT. Well, it wasn't very long after that study came out that they actually came back and retracted it and said oh, hey, we were actually wrong. There were some things that were done wrong in the study. And it actually, when we re-look at it, it actually looks like some of these things are actually better with HRT. But what happened is the train had already left the station, so to speak. And once that happened, it was really hard to kind of dial it back in. And so then you just had years of women just kind of living in this dark cloud of HRT is bad. And that, like, I really truly feel like we're living in a hormone revolution now, and we're starting to see that tide shift. And you're seeing, like, even like in mainstream media, information coming out about the benefits of HRT. So in a nutshell, what a lot of those studies, like some of that had to do with the fact that it was a synthetic estrogen and it wasn't using a bioidentical estrogen. So there's a difference between synthetic hormones and bioidentical hormones. Synthetic hormones, like birth control, uses synthetic hormones. But synthetic hormones are not the same as our own hormones. And what they do is they will attach to the hormone receptor sites, and they will block our own production of hormones. That's how birth control works. Bioidentical hormones are derived from plants. They are made, they're still, synthesized, but they are derived from plants, and they're called bioidentical or body identical because their structure is the same as our own hormones. So that kind of in a nutshell is what happened, like with your mom probably. And so she was living during that time when if you even mentioned HRT to your physician, they were going to be like, no way. And especially if there was any history of breast cancer, either, personally with the patient or in the family. And we are starting to see that tide shift, like I said, and there's more and more education. I still always advise that the discussion around HRT should be taken on an individual account. And so one, you should do a thorough evaluation with the patient, and that always involves knowing their history. And then two is, making sure that it's informed consent, and that the patient knows that they have a choice. And I think that that's the big thing that I try to come from in my position with working in this field is I'm not here to like push a woman one way or another. I am here to help you navigate the journey and to help you understand what your choices are and weigh the pluses and the minuses of both. But by and large, what we're seeing is that there's a lot of positive benefits of using HRT and specifically bioidentical HRT, including less musculoskeletal pain, improved cognition. There was something that just came out just recently showing a tie between dementia and the more menopausal symptoms that you have, that there is a higher link between that and dementia. And that now they need to do more studies on this still, but interesting enough, one of the things that they pointed out in that study is that the women who were doing like an estrogen type of replacement had better scores. So they actually fared better. So we're really seeing, it's such an exciting time, I think, for us as women, because as I said, it's like we're living in a hormone revolution.
I agree, because like I said, I was raised hearing that, like, you can't have hormones because of the history. And it's funny that it got to a point where I was like, there's a thing called quality of life.
Yes.
I don't care. I don't want to live long and feel emotionally unstable, because it was like I would cry or I would rage. And like I said,
yeah,
it's okay to say I'm not the brightest, I'm not going to cure cancer, okay? We all have different gifts in this world. My gift to the world was Anna's even-toned. And then when menopause happened, I was like, Lord, you can't take my gift. I want even-toned Anna back.
Yeah.
So I am so grateful for this hormone revolution. I've just started pursuing it. And I love how you explain the difference between the but what I didn't even understand what bioidentical was or meant that.
Identical?
But that word that Dr. Jen said.
bioidentical. Yeah.
Bioidentical.
You see, some people
Said
will
it
call
right.
it
Yeah,
body identical, but most commonly you hear
I'm
bioidentical.
sorry. So, Dr. Jen, is what you're saying is that Anna said it right and Nagame was the one who mispronounced it? I believe that's what the doctor is saying.
I'm take the fifth.
I couldn't resist it because you know what helps menopause? Laughter. And
Yes,
you know what?
absolutely. You know why? Because it stimulates your vagus. One of the reasons is because it stimulates your vagus nerve, and your vagus nerve runs from your brain all the way down through your digestive system. And so things
And do
that
you know
we
what I
can
just
do.
heard? I just heard you say it stimulates holy fun because when
Yeah.
you say Vegas, I think of Vegas.
That's how her brain works.
And so I just heard holy fun. You
Yeah.
don't need Vegas, you need laughter. And
Yeah.
it'll stimulate holy fun. And
And
speaking of
that
holy
makes me
fun,
think of
go ahead.
Melody. Just like I just thought you had excellent questions, and I felt like maybe I was coming up dry for you, but with just like what are the things that we can do, before going into this as prevention, and I think we talked about this on the last podcast too, was just the power of community and the power of like laughter, the power of like sharing our tears and everything. Like you really cannot underestimate those things. And so sometimes we're looking for like, the fountain of youth or like this, like kind of like, I say that sometimes while we're spending time looking for the extravagant answer to our problem, we will kind of like miss the things, the low-lying fruit and the things that are just kind of plain as day. And so that's like my point in saying don't underestimate like that, because that's your foundation. Any of the other stuff you do, bioidenticals, herbs, vitamins, if you don't have a good foundation, like all of that stuff is just going to come crashing down. So you have to, that good foundation is always first and foremost.
So you just did a good foundation, Melody, because Melody recently came to visit.
I was just going to say,
oh, go
we need
ahead.
more girls' trips.
Yeah. There was a lot of laughter that took place.
This is part of my foundation, girls. It's not
I love
optional.
Everyone needs foundation, girl.
It is. It's so true. I mean, and just being a bit vulnerable myself here, that's something that I'm trying to work on myself, because I spend a lot of time like in, my practice and helping women and like managing the business side of it. And sometimes that means that I'm not spending as much time like in friendships and doing like, I need to practice what I preach too. And so I always like try to be real with my patients and say, I'm on this journey with you too. Like I don't have it all dialed in. I'm not doing everything perfectly. And I have things that I have to be working on too. We all do. Like that's just part of the human experience.
Dr. Jen, am I hearing you say a Boise trip? Is it that? I think that's what you're saying.
I do love Idaho.
You will have a lot of fun.
Come during the summer. We'll take you river rafting. We just won't let Nagame book it because she'll book us on the death trap.
Right.
So my
Rafting
husband and I
trip.
did a trip to Idaho a few years back, and we landed in Boise, and then we drove up to all of a sudden I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's Stanley.
Oh,
We
yeah,
drove up
that's
to
very
Stanley.
popular.
We did like a hike there. Oh, it was just so beautiful, so amazing. So yeah, I'm a big lover of the outdoors, and so Idaho is very easy to fall in love with.
And we're a big lover of Dr. Jen, so it's like the loves would come together.
You would have a lot of fun if you come to Idaho. We'll have a lot of girl fun.
Speaking of girl fun and stuff, we are now transitioning to the adult subject matter
Okay.
of today's podcast.
Yeah.
So if you have littles around that you do not want to hear said subject, come back to us later when you are
Yeah.
solo. I might be asking for a friend. We cannot confirm or deny. I am hearing how there is a problem with vaginal dryness and how menopause affects the sex life. Can
Yeah.
you go into some of that, of how menopause can affect that? Because that affects marriages and
Yeah.
all of that.
How
Yeah.
does it affect
So,
marriages?
Melting.
so
She's such a
yeah, so
troublemaker.
this is, and honestly, I definitely see my fair share of this in my practice, and my heart breaks for women that, I mean, this can be debilitating. It can honestly be debilitating. It, when you are living with vaginal dryness and burning, and you can't have sex with your husband, I mean, it plays a heavy emotional toll on women, just the uncomfortability of it, and then how it impacts their marriage. So first and foremost, if anybody out there is suffering from that, I just want to let you know that you're not the only one. And it definitely is a very real experience that women have during perimenopause and menopause. So part of why that is happening, because of the change in hormones, and specifically estrogen. Estrogen has a lot to do with keeping our tissues hydrated. So the vagina tissues do change, and so they get dried out. So you can have atrophy of those tissues. One of the best things that you can do to help with that is the use of like a bioidentical estrogen. And that can really help women who are struggling with that. Now, there's other things that you have to keep in mind, like if somebody, because it can make you more prone to also like UTI infections. And so if there is like a current yeast infection or anything going on, I will usually say, like, we need to get that under control before we introduce any bioidentical estrogen, because the estrogen, if there's a yeast infection going on, you don't want to like add estrogen to that right away. You want to get the yeast infection in control first. And then there are also like you can get this done at a lot of there are particular clinics that you can go to that will offer like laser type of therapy and radio frequency type of therapy, and that actually can help with the tissues as well. So so there are definitely options, and there's things that you can do to make it better. So if you are this person, like, and this is a struggle, I would just say have the conversation with your practitioner. And if you're not happy with the way that conversation is going, go to somebody that will listen and that will help you find solutions.
I actually just saw some, because, I have some friends who've, at this stage of life find them single and then they remarry. So if the vagina, when you say atrophy, can you explain more what that means so I don't have to Google it later? And we'll start there and then I'll do my follow-up question.
So atrophy just basically means like something is like, if you think of muscle atrophy, so muscle atrophy means that the muscles are like wasting. And so atrophy changes of the vagina tissue just means that those tissues aren't, supple and hydrated like they used to be. And so what happens is the tissues get more dried out and thinned. And when they get dried out and thin, that makes things more uncomfortable.
So if someone was single but saw themselves getting remarried, would it benefit them to, like, is it something where, because if you're not having sex, then you could be like, I don't care how things are faring down there. But
Well, it's a lot of those women are still going to have symptoms, like whether they're having sex or not, usually. Like they might, they're going to just experience uncomfortability.
okay.
So now it could be more pronounced with sexual intercourse, or maybe, that you could say that you feel fine, but then you only notice it with sexual intercourse. So there could be a possibility of that. But if it's pronounced, you're probably going to be feeling it, like even without sexual intercourse.
And I guess what I was thinking is because I actually am in this Facebook group, the Trim Healthy Mama Facebook.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of them before.
And then they just started like a menopause group. So I was reading ladies' comments who are going through menopause. And that's where I was just reading about so many women having this problem. But, and I guess what I'm saying is it something like that you can do it later? Like, because when you say atrophy, I think like, is it gone forever? And
No, they can be rejuvenated.
there we go.
Yeah.
I was
yeah.
trying to think how to word it.
No,
How
but
to
it's
word it.
always going to be better if you try to catch things on the front end, of course, rather than the back end. And every woman's going to be different. But yes, the tissues can be rejuvenated. So I have a particular patient that I'm thinking of right now, because we just went through all this with her, and she is like, she's had a complete turnaround. Like just in her last follow-up I did with her, she just said like, oh my gosh, it's like 1,000% better, and not just, and it also has to do with her mood and her emotions too. So while the mood and emotions were also affected by hormones, also just the very real physical pain of dealing with those urinary syndromes that was causing her emotional distress.
One more question on that. Sorry, the menopause lady has so many questions. I'm like, not wasting this opportunity.
Yeah. And I just want to emphasize too, pelvic floor, like maintaining pelvic floor strength is also really important, because incontinence is something that we also see. So, that's like, could be a whole, topic in and of itself. But, so making sure that you're doing exercises like, Pilates, or like, stretching, weight-bearing type of exercises that will help maintain the integrity of the pelvic floor. And then sometimes seeing a pelvic floor specialist.
That is good to know, because I really have high hopes of keeping all urine on the inside until
Yes, we all
approved
do.
release. I have big dreams in my older age. So, but how can one help the libido? Because that's also a really huge thing. Is there anything like supplement that can help in that area?
So, low libido can that's definitely one of the most common symptoms that you see in perimenopause and menopause. And it has to do with a decline in hormones. And so supporting the hormones, whether that's through, natural measures, or using bioidenticals, or something that I don't use in my practice, but I'll help women navigate that journey, is the use of also testosterone. Because if you're really low in testosterone, that also can affect your libido. And again, it goes back to like trying not to trying not to shame yourself for the reality of what your body's going through, the physiology of what your body's going through, and trying to look at it more from a curious standpoint, and educating ourselves, empowering ourselves, and looking into the things that can best help you. I know I've mentioned maca a few times. But maca is probably one of the, it's a common herb that I use in my practice, and that can help with some of those types of symptoms too. Like if you're just looking for something that's natural. Of course, I would say, you always want to make sure if you're taking medications, you want to cross-check any medications that you're taking against any herbal products. You also have to be careful. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people have, sensitivities to herbs. So, you just want to be careful if you're adding anything in to take a low and slow type of approach, and always listen to your body. I'll tell my patients, I don't care what I tell you. If your body tells you it doesn't like it, listen to your body, and then you just let me know, because your body is speaking our bodies are speaking to us all the time. Our God is given us our bodies an inner wisdom, and it does speak to us. But guess what? We do have to pay attention to it. And so that means that we have to slow down enough and be quiet enough. And what happens is a lot of us are trying to get all the things done on our to-do list and check off all of our boxes, and kind of force, this is what I see, is we're trying to force our bodies to fit into the box that we want it to be, so that we can live the life that we want. And you have to understand that your body is your friend, and you should need to pay attention to it, and you need to be kind to it, and you need to understand that that healing runs on its own course of time and rhythm. So rather than trying to rush things along, try to be patient with it. I know that's easier said than done.
Melody, I'm a big supporter of listening to your body. I just learned this concept a few years ago, and it's just been amazing how God has made our bodies to just tell us things that are off, or whether it's our surrounding, or it's our body telling us what's not good for us, what's good for us. There's something there to be mindful of that and to pay attention to that. So I just learned it in my 40s. So now
I'm still learning it myself too.
Yeah,
and I'm in my 50s.
Starting to learn to listen to my body.
Yeah. It's an art and a practice. And I think especially as Christians, sometimes we get a little afraid when we hear that, because we think oh, that sounds kind of new agey or whatever. But it's this is God gave us our bodies. God gave us this wisdom, and I believe that he wants us to live, in tune with that, and not just in our heads and in the world all the time.
I
Completely agree.
I actually was this was something God was showing me, and I read, how the body keeps score. And so I fearfully presented it to my super conservative abuse counselor. He's an Orthodox Presbyterian pastor who's preached for served, ministered for 50, 60 years. He's in his 80s. And I thought he's going to say, this is heretical, listening to your body is not right. He actually brought up scripture that was yeah, the Holy Spirit talked through your body. You need to pay attention to what your body's saying. That's how one of the ways God works.
That's great.
So, yeah, I agree. It's been such a new concept to me. Melody, did you have any other questions? Anything you wanted to say before we wrap up?
I just wanted to thank Dr. Jennifer, because it's hard to actually experience such intricate wisdom on these subjects that we can often just hold really private inside of our minds and hearts, and wish for help, wish for guidance. And I just wanted to thank you for being outspoken. And also, you just have a very peaceful and warm approach. You feel so approachable and so helpful and kind. And all of that is just such a blessing. So I wanted to make sure you knew what an impact you're making, and how grateful we are that you would spend your time with us and help us, and also help the people who are listening.
You're going to make me cry. Thank you.
I know. As always, 5 out of 5. Totally recommend. Dr. Jen.
I do want to close by asking, how has Jesus helped you through the ups and downs of you've gone? through perimenopause,
hmm
and I'm sure. Like, how has God, your faith in Jesus, have helped you through it? I mean, we've talked about the medical stuff, but what would you say faith-wise in your relationship with God?
Wow. So that like is could be a whole podcast on its own. But so I definitely had my own journey, and it was my journey that led me to where I am today. And I really do, not to sound like a bumper sticker, but I really do believe that God can use some of our greatest challenges to be our greatest testimonies. And I do feel that if it wasn't for the things that I went through, I don't think that I would have the passion to do what I do, and help other women. So I suffered from chronic migraines. I had and I had debilitating migraines. Migraines are, not fun regardless. But I got really, really sick from my migraines. And it it was like life altering. Um, and I was always suspicious that, and this was before like I made the shift in my practice to doing functional medicine and, b- working with hormones specifically. And I was always suspicious that hormones were part of what was going on. So in that's part of what drove me or led me into my studies into functional medicine. And it came to find out that indeed it was my hormones. So getting my hormones under check was one of the things that probably the biggest thing that helped me. But in that, in the middle of my struggle, I didn't know if it was going to get better or not. And God talks to me like in a certain way. I think that God knows the things that he talks to us all like, I think in a unique way that like what we need to hear or what resonates with us because we're his children, right? And so just like we talk to all of our children like differently because we kind of have a sense of how they're wired and what will impact them. So God does that with me. And one of the way God does that with me is he's kind of no nonsense with me. And so I had clearly felt like he said to me, like, Jennifer, what if this is like, while you're here on this earth, what if this is like as good as it gets? Like, what if you, like, you're just going to have these migraines? And can you still see my goodness? Can you still see my love for you? And that was, for me, and I believe all of us, like if you're going through a health challenge, I would just say to you that there's something in there for you to learn from that. And I don't believe that God inflicts these things upon us. I just believe they're part of a fallen world. But I do believe that he can use it for good. And so one of the ways that he used it for me was to get me to shift my perspective from what I couldn't control and what I didn't have into everything that I did have and all the ways that God's love and goodness was around me. And that was for me like a big spiritual healing that I think ended up having a manifestation in my physical health. Because part of it was I was fighting, like, this isn't fair, this isn't right, I take care of myself, I'm a doctor, like, why is this happening to me? One of the scriptures that I hung on to during that time, and I would say this out loud in the shower all the time, was Psalm 103. And so Psalm 103, part of that verse says that you are forgiven and you are healed, right? And so I claimed that promise over me. And what I leaned into was that I was healed. I was already healed. I may not have the earthly manifestation of it like right now, but I know that by the blood of Jesus, when I die and I go to heaven, that I am healed. I know that Jesus has healed me. And so just, Jesus himself had to walk through all this, yucky stuff. Who am I to think that like that I'm anything that I'm not going to have to go through my, the fallout of living on this earth. You know what I mean? So that was just something that really helped me. And that psalm has kind of been a cornerstone of my practice. And it's been a psalm that I share with my patients who are struggling. And I will just challenge them to claim that promise over their lives. Like, even if it doesn't feel like you have it right now, it is a promise that God has given you. So I'm not a theologian, and I don't, hopefully I'm not like saying something incorrect there, but
you're giving your amazing testimony. That's what we're supposed to do, what God is doing and has done through you. That is amazing. I think it's a good and finish, because we just, it's ultimately we learn and we grow, but ultimately it's clinging to Jesus. And there's psalms and verses we've all clung to, and we've said out loud, and we've trusted, and as we've hung on to Jesus and just trusted him through the journey until we see him and we're fully healed.
Amen.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
God is good all the time, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you so much for your time. And we really appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. Jennifer.
It's absolutely my pleasure, 100%, anytime. I love being with you guys.
This has been the Hanging On Podcast. Make sure to like, rate, and comment. It'll really help. And we'll see you next time on the Hanging On Podcast.